What's up, everybody? Welcome to Worship Matters. I'm Jonathan, and today we're going to talk about live streaming and what it says about our worship. But first, if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. I talk everything worship and review Christian music, Christian worship music usually. So if you enjoy that, give us a like. I'd love for you to join the family here. And if you got any songs or anything about worship you want to talk about, let me know in the comments. I'd love to check it out. So today, we're going to just talk about live streaming. And so, as you saw in the video, title, I am going to argue that you should not, as a church, live stream your worship. Alright, so I'm going to caveat that. I'm not saying you should not record your worship and put it online. I'm going to separate those two things. But live streaming for specifically congregational worship, that's where I have a problem. And the reason that I have a problem with this, and I'll go into more depth about it, is that I think you're fundamentally teaching, by doing that, you're teaching and implying that it is okay to not gather with the body of believers for worship. All right, so there's a few verses in the Bible that talk about Christian worship. Everyone probably remembers the verse, "Do not forsake the gathering of the believers among yourselves." Everybody probably remembers that. And notice that it's a gathering. The command is don't forsake the gathering. So you should always be going to the gathering. That's not a watch the gathering online. Now I should say, this is my opinion. So if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions. Love to hear your arguments, why you think that it's okay. Obviously there's not a command, don't live stream, and I don't think it's sinful for the church to do it. I just think it's unwise. So let me clarify that. So in that command to not forsake the gathering, we have implicitly that we should gather. We should physically be there in the gathering. And part of worship is being present, not just in body, but also in mind. Like, we need to be present in what is going on, and you can't do that from miles away on the internet. I don't care how much you enjoy watching it on TV, you can't be a part of the gathering of the body of believers at your house, away from the worship. Now, I mean, that's not to be confused with, like, if you have a house church and your church is literally at your house. Just to clarify, I don't know why you would make that argument, but there you go. Just in case, we'll close that knot right there. So, when a church live streams their worship, what they are implying is that it is okay for people to not come to church and watch it online. I think you could be mindful. Like, let's say you're on the other side and you want to argue that it's okay to live stream, or that you should live stream. I think you could argue that we want to make it clear that what we are doing is that we want you present in the worship and not just watching online. So we offer this online service. Also note, during the time that basically every other church in your time zone is going to be worshiping. So if somebody's watching it and they're not in a different time zone, if they're watching it live, why aren't they at church? Why aren't they at the gathering? Why are they forsaking the gathering? That's my question. That should be their accountability partner's question when they get home or when they get back to church in their small groups or whatever. They should be like, hey, why weren't you at church Sunday? Like, where were you? Were you just watching online instead of coming in? Like, I don't know. there there's other commands in the scripture. One is in the context of church discipline. And what does it say? Everybody's heard this: where two or more are gathered in my name, I will be there. I will be with you, or something like that. The implication is that the gathering, which of course it's talking about church discipline, but church discipline is a part of the body, the function of the church, the local church. So part of doing that is you have to actually be there. You have to be gathered together. And it's not just a thing you can do online. This is like something you need to like be present with. So not to say that you can't do like accountability online, although personally I don't like that either. Like if you're going to do accountability, just go hang out with people. Like they're people I can't be around because they live in other countries or other states. And so like the best I can do is like call them or like video chat, but they're not part of my local church. And like many of them are sent out from my local church, but they're part of their own church. And so I don't have the same level of commitment to them or covenant with them that I do with my regular church members. And so like that, having friends that are Christian online that you hold accountable because you're friends, that's fine. But that's different from the level of people that you're on the ground with, and treating them as if they live, a day's journey away. I just think that's unbiblical. I think you need to be present with the people that you are with. So back to live streaming, specifically for church worship. What I'm not against, and I actually am kind of for this, I'm not against recording your worship service, and I'm not against putting your service online. I'm not against that at all. I think that's a good way that we can attract people to the church, because let's face it, we're in an online world. People, when they want to know about your church, they go online. And so I get the criticism of, well, we want people to be able to discover us because unlike in the olden days where you just, maybe there was like one Baptist church or one church in that area, and so everybody just, asked and they could find it. Well, now you got like in some cities there's like hundreds of churches. And so what do? You go online to find a good one. And so, or one that most aligns with your beliefs. And so, I get that. And I think that online is something churches should do. But I think I want to separate the online streaming part with the putting us out there online so people can find us and see how we worship, see what we believe. I think those are important things to know. And so I think different people are made differently, and they appreciate different aspects. And so like finding a church that is attractive to you in the style and genre of worship, musically and theologically, I think that's fine. And so like what better way than to watch sermon or services online? You can see what kind of church are they, what denomination are they, what do they believe about the gospel, that kind of stuff. I think that's really good. And so I think it's good to have that online, but the difference between posting it online later and live streaming is that implicit in live streaming, what you're telling them is that we're expecting you to be able to watch this instead of coming to church. Whereas if you post it after, we're like implicitly in doing that, we're saying you missed it. You missed the church gathering. And we understand that life's difficult sometimes and people have to travel for different reasons, or people get sick. But you're missing out. You're not being a part of this worship service, and you need to be. And so, although I think there are a couple benefits for live streaming, and I'll get into that. I think in general, I think the rule should be don't live stream, but post your video afterwards so that people who are not at church during church hours, because generally speaking, most churches have worship at the same time, at least in the States. I don't know how all of you in the other countries do, but I'm on the East Coast and the U.S. of A. And pretty much every church you go to is going to have a basically similar time, 10:30, 10:45, 11 o'clock, somewhere in there. Maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later. It just depends. But it's right around the same time. So if you're all live streaming at the same time, why are they watching online? Why don't they just go to church? Like, what's the excuse? Does God not deserve an effort in worship? We have that time with David, who he's going to make a sacrifice to God, and this one of the people offers him everything to provide for the sacrifice. And David said, "Should my sacrifice cost me nothing?" So I think in our worship, of course it's going to cost us something. It's going to cost us time. It's going to cost us effort to participate in worship. Worship is not a passive event. Worship is an active event. And if that means we have to get up, speaking as somebody who likes to sleep in and doesn't like mornings, sometimes that means setting 5 alarms to make sure you wake up on time so you can get to church. I've been there. I'm not picking on people who are late. I'm always late to just about everything. That's something that I actively work on. But specifically people who just don't come to church because they don't want to get up early or whatever. Do you not care about church worship? What's going on here? I feel like there's a heart problem here. I know in my life, I think I can make any excuse to not go to church worship sometimes. It's any little thing. Maybe I just didn't wake up right. Maybe I've got a headache. Maybe I just don't feel good. Why am I not coming to worship God? What is it? Because I have this crutch of being able to watch online, as if that's the same thing as being a part of the gathering of the body of believers. I don't know. The food for thought there. Food for thought. I didn't really intend to spend a ton of time on why people aren't going to church. Although I think there's a certain event that happened a couple years ago where all the churches were shut down and people were encouraging the church to watch online. And I think a lot of people just stopped going to church because of that, because we trained them to think of church as something that's an online thing. I actually saw this church online the other day, and they said that because of that stuff that happened in 2020, I don't know what YouTube's rules are. Not that I can be monetized anyways, but they said that because of that, they realized that they needed to change the way they did church worship. And so they moved to a completely online worship structure. And then every 6 months they met in person. I'm like, are you crazy? What are you doing? Do you just not care about church life? About church worship? You cannot worship God in the way that's required by Scripture online, away from everybody else. It's just impossible. You have to be among the believers. You have to be with other people. This is a core tenet of the faith. I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the word ecclesia, which is the word we get church, it means the gathering. It's a group of people coming together. And there's so much going on in our church fellowship and church worship corporately that if you're just watching online, you are missing everything. You can worship personally. You don't have to, not all worship is congregational. Some worship is personal. throughout the rest of the week when you're not going to church, I assume you're worshiping God, right? Or you should be. Not all of us are good at worshiping every day. Looking at myself here. But, that's something that we strive to do, is be mindful of and worshipful of God every day. And so, personal worship is great. That's why I distinguish between the corporate worship or congregational worship and personal worship in the songs that we review. But if all you're getting is personal worship and you aren't getting corporate worship, you're missing half of the worship experience. And if all you're getting is corporate worship and you aren't getting personal worship, you're missing half of the worship experience. What are you doing? How are you trying to live this Christian life without half of what God has created for us to do? It's like taking communion. Instead of taking both the bread and the wine, you're taking the wine and not the bread, or you're taking the bread and not the wine. And it's like you're missing half of it. The body and the blood are one. Like we take both. They are one event. Why are you missing out? You need both corporate worship, where you're worshiping with other believers, and you need your own personal worship. So this has kind of gone way off topic. This is why I think that live streaming is not good. Because even if the church themselves are not or are very careful about how they present it, I think implicitly you are telling people that it's okay for them to not come to church every week. I know that we went from this like rigid structure that was very legalistic, and I don't want to go back to that. Back in the day, especially as Baptists, I speak as a Baptist, we went from this very rigid structure where it's like, if you miss a Sunday, well, something's wrong with you, to like now we're at this other extreme, and it's just like, well, if you don't come to church for 6 months, but then you come during that one time, it's okay. I'm like, no, you should be at church every week. But it's okay if you miss some. That's life. God gives us other responsibilities. And so, yes, you're going to miss church every once in a while. You have family responsibilities. You have work responsibilities. You have Christian responsibilities. There's so many other things that can draw us away. But that's no excuse for not being at church. And if we are live streaming, we're saying, hey, it's okay. You can just watch on Facebook. You can just watch on YouTube. It's okay if you're not coming to church this week. Yeah, I know you're feeling a little under the weather. Maybe you have a slight headache and you just don't really feel like getting up and getting dressed and going in and talking to people. So why don't you just watch on Facebook this week? That is wrong. That is wrong. Okay? If you have to suffer a little bit, go to church, because I guarantee you, God will bless you. God will bless you. I'll tell you, there's been so many times where I went to church when I didn't want to. I wasn't feeling good, and dude, God just blessed me that day. It's like, okay, this is why I need it. Sometimes Satan tempts me to forget all the blessings that come from church worship, and then I go to church worship, and it's like, oh, praise God. He is so good. He is richly blessing us for obedience. So those are my arguments for not live streaming. I don't know if it's exhaustive, but let me address a couple critiques, or at least any that I can think of before I turn this off. Here's one. So I'll hear this question about, well, what about shut-ins? What about people who they physically cannot get to church? And they're like, okay, well, it can be a blessing for them to have a live stream where they can, in a way, join us, whereas they never could before. So, okay. I think that's fair. That's fair. But I think there are other ways that you could actually do it that are better than just sending them a live stream. So what if a small group of you go to them each week and worship with them? Take the church to them rather than streaming a video. Maybe that would actually be a better, more healthy way to encourage them. And I'll tell you, a lot of shut-in people, they don't see a lot of people. And so having a few people storm their home and sing worship music and read the Bible and take communion together, I bet you that's going to bless their life a lot more than watching online. Does it take effort? Yes. Yes, it does. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of love. It takes a lot of charity. And I say this as one who, hasn't necessarily been the best in that myself, but it's something that I'm coming to understand. So I suppose if you don't have the means to do that, live streaming could be a way. But let me make a second caveat. Maybe if let's just say you just feel like you have to live stream, you just can't do it any other way. Okay, maybe there's a way to actually live stream without telling people it's okay to not be at church, and that would be to not live stream to the public. So there are ways where you can live stream to a private group without broadcasting it to the world and telling the world, hey, you don't have to be at church. You can say to these specific people, we want to meet your needs in the moment. And so for a time, we're going to give you a live stream so that you can, in some way, though we know it's not a full way, in some way you can worship at the same time. But I feel like don't supplement that without the actually going to their house and being with them and experiencing life with them. Don't separate those two. Don't make it a replacement for visitation, because visitation is just as important. But if you want to do it that way, so it kind of feels like they're there to some extent with the main worship, okay, I can see that. But don't do it in such a public way where now suddenly everybody's allowed to, because what we don't want to do is teach the people at large, or at least what I don't want to teach them, the people at large, is that it's okay to miss worship and not be there in person. Also, just as a side, I don't really like it when we talk to people online. If you're not there, you're not there. Like, I realize with modern technology, we talk to people online all the time. I'm kind of talking to you, even though this isn't live. But I don't know you. I don't know any of you. I'm happy to get to know you, but I don't know you. So I just feel like when you're at church worship, you need to be in the moment with the people who are there and not focused on whoever may be watching. And for most churches, that's going to be almost nobody. For most churches, you might get a handful of people. Sometimes it's missionaries in other countries. But I'm just going to tell you, missionaries in other countries can watch a couple hours later. It's not going to hurt them to watch the video a few hours later. They'll get the same amount of stuff out of it. I promise you, it's not going to be any different. Like, some people are like, oh, well, there's just this thing. I mean, we can tell the difference between live and not live, but so I guess I already introduced another objection. Well, what about like missionaries? We have all these people we want to support, and we want them to feel a part of what we're doing, so they don't feel so disconnected from us. And I get it. But again, they're not connected to you by watching your sermon online or watching your worship service online. Like, they're not really getting any connection out of that. There's no difference. They'll feel a little bit of a difference, but functionally, there's no difference. Sorry about that. I got a little excited and I hit the record button. What I was saying, functionally, there's no difference between watching it live and watching it an hour later. There's functionally no difference. They'll know in their mind that they're not watching it live, and I think that's enough. I think that's enough for them to know I'm not a part of this gathering, and that's kind of my main point. When we put it live, sometimes I think the lines can be blurred in this online era where you feel like you're actually a part of something that you're not a part of. I'm not saying you can't have online communities. Don't get me wrong about that. I think those are fun. I think you can talk to people and get to know people online, but I don't think you can do that with corporate worship. Corporate worship is not one of those things because there's no interaction. You can't actually get to know somebody that in the way that church worship gets to know people online, because like one of the things about church worship is when you're singing together, you're actually hearing each other's voices. But we can't hear the missionaries or the shut-in who are singing wherever they're singing, watching online. Maybe they're singing with us, and maybe they can hear a little bit of our digitalized voices, but it's not the same. And so, yeah, I think that we want to be very careful, and I'll close with this. We want to be very careful about replacing physical gathering with people of God and watching something on the computer, or watching something on the phone, or watching something on the TV. Streaming online is absolutely no different than watching an evangelist on TV, except maybe the preaching's a little better. And maybe the music's a bit older. I don't know. There's literally no difference from a TV preacher and a YouTube church sermon service. So those are my thoughts. A bit long-winded because this is something that I'm passionate about. Why? Because worship matters. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have any concerns? Are there any things that I'm missing as far as ways that it's wrong, or ways that it could be done well? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to have a discussion about it. Like I said, I'm not like calling anybody out for doing this. I think most churches these days live stream. But I think we need to be thoughtful about how we're doing it and why we're doing it, and what we are doing says about what we believe about worship. So there you go. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. Peace.